Now, when it comes to backend databases for your no-code apps, you typically have two choices. There's Firebase and there's also Supabase. Now, both Firebase and Supabase come with free plans. Now, if your app becomes relatively popular, you will have to pay for those services. Now, what if I told you that there's a third option that you can use with your no-code apps as well? And not only is this a database backend lightning fast, but it's also 100% free. And so in today's video, I'm going to be telling you what that database backend provider is. We're going to have a general overview where I explain the main features and functionality. And then a little bit later in the video, I'm going to be showing you how you can integrate this amazing backend video with your no-code apps and specifically FlutterFlow. Now, before we get started, as always, all the apps and all the resources that I'm going to be covering in today's video, you'll be able to get access via my Patreon page. And you can learn more about our amazing Patreon community and some of the benefits via a link just below this video. Now, the backend database provider that we're going to be covering today is called Pocketbase. And if you head over to pocketbase.io, you're going to be viewing their main page here. And this is what they say: open source backend for your next SaaS and mobile app in one file. And here's what they provide you with. They give you a real-time database. They give you authentication, file storage, and an admin dashboard. And there's also a bunch of other features that we're going to be covering in just a minute. Now, here they also give you a live demo where you can play around with some of the fake data, take a look at the dashboard and some of the functionality. And we are going to be checking out this demo in just a minute. But if you scroll down, and here you can take a look at some of the features that this amazing 100% free backend database supports. So we have real-time database, we have authentication, we have file storage. It's also extendable, which means that you can write your own custom function. And so if you click on explore all features, you're going to be redirected to their documentation page, and you can see everything that they support. And you will immediately see that they support a lot of the things that you get with both Firebase as well as Supabase. Now, they also give you access to a live demo, which is essentially an instance where you can play around with the data, check out some of the features, you can add records, remove records, things like that. But instead of playing around with this live demo, why don't we create our own instance? And that way you can learn how to create your own custom instance so that you can use this instance for your apps. Now, if you head over to this facts section here, which stands for frequently asked questions, you can see that the first point here covers hosting. So the question is, do you offer hosting? And the answer is no. Pocketbase is a self-hosted only. If you're looking for a free option, I recommend fly.io and the following example guidance. So while you can use fly.io and a lot of these providers, we are going to be using one of my favorite providers called Railway. And this is a super fast and a super easy to use hosting service that gives you a generous free plan. And this is a service that I've talked about in some of the previous videos. And so chances are, if you've seen some of my previous videos, you know exactly how to set it up. And so what you want to do is you want to head over to railway.app and you want to log in into your free account. Now, once you're logged into your free account, you're going to click on dashboard. And so I'm here logged into Railway. This is my dashboard page. And as you can see, I already have some projects here. And that is because I use Railway for a lot of different things, including some of the stuff that I talked about on this channel, but also some of my other private projects as well. Once you're on this page, what you want to do is you want to click on a new project, and here you can just type Pocketbase. As soon as you start typing, you're going to see you have these options here, right? So what you want to do is you want to click on this link here, which essentially selects both of them. We're going to click here. Now, on this page, you're going to be given some options when it comes to deploying this specific template. And so as you can see, we're deploying this template here, and it wants to know where should we clone this repo. Okay, now chances are when you initially signed up for Railway, you've probably used your GitHub account, or at least you've connected your GitHub account to Railway. Okay, so this is my GitHub account here, and this is going to be the name of the repository where it's going to clone this repository here. And this is important because before you can actually deploy something, you need to clone it into a repository that you control. And so that is why it's suggesting that I clone this stuff here to a repository that's going to be part of my account here. So this is fine, Pocketbase. It's a good name. And we're going to leave everything on defaults, okay? Next, we're going to click on deploy. And we're going to wait a few moments for this system to deploy our own Pocketbase service. So as you can see, it's building right now. So it should be just a few more moments. Okay, it's deploying right now, and it just finished deploying. And as soon as it finishes deploying, it gives us a URL with which we can access this service online. So once you see this whole thing become green, what you can do is you can customize this URL, and you can also customize a couple of things. So if you head over to settings, you can scroll down, and you can either customize this automatically generated URL here. So you can click here and you can change this from Pocketbase production to something else, or you can even buy a custom domain and connect it here. Now, for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just going to be using here. That is fine. But just so that you know, it's very, very easy to change it to something else if you want. Now, the next thing that you want to do is you want to click on this link and you're going to be redirected to a page. Now, initially, you're going to see this message right here. And that is because we don't have any data right now at all. And so what you want to do is you want to append an underscore to this URL. And that underscore is needed for you to be able to access the admin page. So if you append an underscore here and press enter, you're going to be redirected to a dashboard page. Now, on the initial logins, you need to create an account. So you need to create your first admin account in order to continue. So I'm just going to type in some information here, click on create and log in, and it's going to create that initial account, okay? And so here I am logged in into my own instances dashboard page. And so let's talk about some of the things that you can do with it. Well, on the left-hand side, we have three things here, okay? So we have collections. This is where you can access all of your data. We also have logs. If you click on logs, you can see some of the things that we were doing, right? So every access to the database, you're going to see here, whether there are errors or, successful requests, you're going to see it right here. Very, very cool. Next, you can click on settings, and here's where you can configure some of the things having to do with your own private instance of Pocketbase. So we have application, mail settings for sending out, users sign up emails or forget password emails. You have file storage here, backups. You can also export collections and import them into another Pocketbase instance, which is very, very cool. And here we have different auth providers, right? So if you want to implement a third-party authentication into your app, so something like using Apple login, Facebook login, GitHub login, Google login, Microsoft, etc., you can easily configure some of the, third-party logins here. We also have token options here, and this here controls how long the various authentication tokens are active. Okay, so you have various tokens here. Next, you have admins, and here's where you can create new admin accounts. So for instance, if you're working on a team, it's not just you, but you have other people, you can create other admin accounts here by clicking on this new admin button. But the first thing that I want to do is I want to show you how you can create a brand new collection. And then later on, I'm going to show you how you can access and manipulate some of the data inside this collection. So in order to create a new collection, you want to click on new collection, and you're going to give it a name. So let's say we are creating a new collection for customers. So you want to type in the name here, and here you can specify the kind of collection that you're building. So whether it's a base collection, a view collection, or an auth collection, okay? So most of your collections that you're going to be creating are going to be base collections. A view collection is something slightly different, and I'm going to be covering that in just a few moments. Whereas if you're creating an auth collection, that's going to list your users that you may want to have logged in using some of the other methods that are different from your default user collection. Okay, so for the base collection, once you have the name, the next thing you want to do is you want to add new fields. Now, it's important to note that you're given system fields here, right? So we have an ID, we have a created and updated field. These are essentially date time fields, and these are automatics. You do not need to create them yourself. So we're going to click on new field, and here you can pick the kind of field that you want. So I'm going to pick plain text, and I'm going to say name, okay? Next, I'm going to add another field, and let's say a number. And let's say this is a number that, you know, how much the user has bought, okay? So something very, very simple. We just have a name and the amount bought, okay? So I'm just going to call it amount. And we're going to click on create, okay? So once we do that, we are seeing a new collection here, and we don't have any records yet. And so we can create a new record by clicking here. Now for the ID, we're going to leave it empty, and that way it's going to auto generate a record ID here by itself. But for the name, let's say we enter John, and let's say he bought 500 worth of goods from us, right? We're going to click on create, and now we have one record. And this ID field, right, it has been auto-generated, okay, as well as this created and updated fields here as well. So let's create another record. So let's say this is Michael, and he spent $350. We're going to click create, and now we have two records here. Now, let's say you have a list of customers and you want an easy way to see the customers that have spent above a certain amount. Now, the easiest way to do that is by creating a new collection. And this time we're going to pick view collection. Okay, so, and let's say I call this collections customers wealthy, and this is going to list all the customers that have spent more than, $400 in this example. Okay, so as soon as you select view, you have a different options here. So you have something called the query. And the way views work is that you're not going to be defining fields and creating records in this view, but you're only going to be specifying how you want the data to be pulled in from your other collections. So let's say in this case, we want to display various fields, let's say the name of the customer, the amount, but only if the amount is greater than or equal to 400. And so in this case, you're going to type select ID name from customers where amount is greater than or equal to 400. Okay, we're going to click on create, and now we've successfully created collection. And so immediately we see this one record here, and that is because if you go into customers, you can see that the only person that spent greater than or equal to 400 is John. Now, what's cool about these views is that these views update automatically. So if I create a new record, let's say this is going to be 1,000, okay, and I click on create, I'm going to see Jake here. But if I go into my view here, I'm going to see Jake here automatically update, and that is because this thing is dynamic. It automatically pulls data from our other collections that we specified. And it can also pull data from multiple collections if you want. It can combine data. It can do a lot of interesting things. And then you can easily access this view just like how you can easily access regular base collections as well. Now, here we are only seeing an ID and name, but what if we also wanted to see an amount? Well, in that case, you want to click on edit collection, and you want to change the fields that we want to pull. So we have ID name, and I'm going to specify amount, save changes, confirm, and now we're seeing the amount here. So we have ID, name, and amount. So you can fine tune the kind of data that you want to access very, very easily. And if I click on this record, I'm going to be seeing this record preview here that pulls it from customer. I can't really edit it because it's read only. A view is kind of like a window into my main collection. But if I go into customers and let's say I added Jake, I click here and I change Jake to 200, click save changes. Now Jake is no longer going to be displayed in this view. We're only should be seeing John now. So if I click here, I'm only seeing John, and I have this preview as well. And so typically the way you can set this up is you're going to have, your regular number of base collections. So customers, users, products, etc., etc. But views, you can have multiple views that are pointing to one collection depending on a specific criteria, which is really, really nice. And so if I want to see, high spenders, I want to see low spenders, I want to see, people from this geographic area, I can create views for that, and these views are going to automatically update depending on the data that they're pointing to, depending on the data in these main collections that those views are pointing to. And so after you create your multiple base collections and multiple views, you can easily access this data. Now, of course, it's also very, very trivial to change how your data is set up, whether these are base collections or view collections, in order to change how you view the data. So for instance, let's say we have this customers collection, and what I want to do is I want to add another field, and this is going to be a Boolean here, right? A true or false field. And let's say it's going to be called paid, whether the customer paid or not. And we're going to click on Save Changes. And now we have this paid field, and it's all false. So essentially we have 3 customers and none of them have paid. And so if I click here, I can change this paid to true. And now I can create a new collection. We'll make it a view, and I can say customers. And here I can just say select ID, name, amount from customers where paid is true. And so I want to build a view that lists only the customers that have paid. I'm going to click on create. And now we have another view where, we're just looking at customers that have paid, and we have one customer here. And that is because Jake is the only one that paid. So let's say Michael paid. I'm going to set Michael paid to true, go back to customers, and we see 2 customers, Michael and Jake. And so here I quickly and easily created another view that displays a slightly different type of data depending on your application requirements. Now, regardless whether you are in a base collection or a view collection, you can also sort by column here. You can also filter data. So for instance, let's say I want to filter by name. I can just say name equals to Jake. Click on search, and I'm just looking at Jake. So I can easily filter with this top level filter. I can click on clear, and I can also sort them by amount. So here I'm sorting them by amount in descending order. I can also sort them in ascending order, right? So going bigger, increasing, and here's descending. I can sort them by paid, updated, etc., etc. And I can also refresh data if needed. Now, this is all nice and all, and I gotta admit that this is a really, really cool and minimalistic dashboard that allows you to do most of the things that you want to do with your data. But what good it is for us if we only are manipulating data in this dashboard and we can't access this data from the outside? Well, fortunately, with Pocketbase, you have 2 main ways of accessing this data. So if you pick any of the collections, regardless of what they are, you can click on this API preview, and you can see the 2 main ways that you can access this data. So the first way that you can access this data is by using an SDK. So you can use a JavaScript, a Dart. They also have other SDKs as well. And this is going to be useful if you're building an app with code. And so if you're coding an app, you have a snippet that allows you to do various operations. So for instance, we have here list and search. Well, you have a snippet that either, fetches all the records. Here you can filter by various conditions. You can do a lot of interesting things. If you click on view, you can view customers. Here you can create customers, update, delete, or here you can subscribe to real-time changes via server-side events. Okay, this is a real-time technique of doing it. But what if we are using a no-code tool and we are not coding the app in JavaScript or Dart? Well, in that case, you can easily access your data using their really nicely designed API interface. So let's say you click on list and search, you can scroll down and you have this API details. And so you can easily access your data using this API URL here, this API reference here. Okay, and if you scroll down, you have various parameters. So you can specify a page. If you are paging, you can sort them, you can filter, expand. So if I go into create, for instance, this is my URL, API URL for creating records, right? So here I have body parameters. They're all optionals. And I also have query parameters, right? Here I have various responses that, my system can get. This is a 200, which means everything is okay. This is failed to create record. And this is you're not allowed to perform this request. So this one is like an error. And this one is forbidden. So if you have some kind of security settings on that data, and if you're just logging in without authenticating yourself first, you're going to get this 403 error message. Now, fortunately, if you're using a no-code tool such as FlutterFlow, you can easily access this data in two ways. You can access this via APIs, and you can also access it using this programmatic interface as well. Now, before we jump into FlutterFlow and start building our app, you want to make sure that you have the right permissions set. And so let's say I want to access our customers collection using an API. The first thing I want to do is I want to click on Edit Collection, and I want to click on API rules. And as you can see, everything is admin only, right? So list is admins only, view, create, update, all of this is admins only. And so for the purpose of this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these permissions so that we can easily access our app. Obviously, in your production app, you want to have these permissions on and configure them correctly. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here, and that's going to remove admin access. And if I leave this empty, it's going to grant everyone access. Okay, so I'm going to remove all this. That way I can access it. Click on Save Changes. And now if I click on API Preview and I scroll down, I don't have that message that I had before telling me that I need to be an admin in order to access this endpoint. So I can pick any of the endpoints and it doesn't have that message that it had to be before, which you might have noticed. And so now that we've double checked our API permissions, we are ready to start building our no-code app. And so here I am logged into FlutterFlow. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to set up an API call. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to add an API call, and I'm going to go back into Pocketbase, click on API Preview, and I want to double check the URL of the endpoint. So if you select this, you can come and paste it here. We also need the domain name. And so we're going to copy this domain name that I have here on the system. Your instance domain name is obviously going to be different. So make sure that you pay attention to that. And we are going to give our API call a name. So let's say this is a list. Okay. So we're going to say add call. Next, we're going to go to response and test, and we want to make sure that we're actually getting a list of those 3 customers. Okay, we're going to do test API call. And as you can see, we have 200 success, and we have an items array containing the objects of each of the customers. So here's John, here's Michael, and here's Jake, and paid is true, and here paid is false. The next thing you want to do is you want to click on recommended. And here you want to decide which data is important to you. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at items. Okay, so I'm just going to select items here, go to selected, and I'm interested in this list of objects, right? Which is essentially this items here. If I was doing pagination, I might be interested in page and per page and total items. But in this case, I'm only interested in items. So I'm going to call it items here, click save. And now we are ready to display that data. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to do a list view. I'm going to add a list view here. And inside the list view, I want to display some information about those customers. So for instance, name, number, amount, and maybe paid. These are some of the things that I want to display. So as a child, I'm going to add a row. And inside the row, I'm going to add 3 text fields. Okay, I'm going to duplicate this and we're going to center the row. And I also want to give a little bit of top padding to the list view so it's not running up against this, top app bar here. And now we need to load up that list view, with the data from the API call. So I'm going to select this list view, come back here, backend query, and I'm going to do a select API call, select list, okay, click on confirm. The next thing that I want to do is I want to click here, generate dynamic children, and I want to select our list response here, select items, click confirm, and here I can type in the customer and click confirm, okay? And that allows me to take all the data that I'm getting from that API call and to split it into different objects as I'm getting it. Because remember, we're getting a list of objects, essentially a list of customers, but we don't really want the list. We want each of those customers, each of those objects. And so now that we've set up here, we have a customer, we can click on each individual item. We can click here, select customer, and here you want to do a JSON path, and you want to formulate a JSON path to the data that you want to display here, okay? And so let's double check what the data was real quick so that I can make sure that I have it set up correctly. If I click on test API, as you can see, the data that I'm interested in is name and amount. So exactly the same field names that we had when we're setting up the whole collection in our dashboard. So no surprises here. Sometimes you might have it, capitalized. So you want to make sure that you take that into account. But here it's all lowercase name, paid, and amount. Okay. So let's go back here, click here, customer, JSON path, name. Here, click here. Let's do that again. Customer, JSON path. Here, we're going to click on paid. Customer, JSON path. Okay, click on confirm. Okay, and here we can just customer list. So now we have a basic list view as a result of doing an API call from our database. So let's go ahead and run this app and let's see if it works. Let's give it a few moments for the app to finish building and executing. All right, so here's our app. And as you can see, we have a list of those customers. So here's the name, this is the amount, and this right here is whether they paid or not. Now, let's say you want to delete one of these records here via the UI and access our backend. Well, how would you do that? Well, you would need to execute another API call, specifically the delete API endpoint. Okay, so let's do that right now. If we go back to the UI, the first thing that we need to do is we need to add a delete button. So I'm going to add a button here and I'm going to say delete. And you can also change the color here. You could make it maybe something so people know that we're modifying data. Let's go ahead and reload this app. Okay, we have this button now, but it's not doing anything. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is we need to add an API call. I'm going to click here, add an API call. We're going to say delete. And now we need to go back to our Pocketbase, click on delete, and take a look at this API call. So here's our API endpoint. We're going to specify customers, but we also need to specify the ID of the record to delete. So we're going to come here, copy that, paste it in here, and then copy our host name here, paste it in the beginning, clean it up. And we also need a variable, right? Because this is going to be filled in dynamically. So we're going to come into variables, add a variable ID, and it's going to be a string, add call. And now we can list it here, okay? Like this, surrounded by square bracket. Now this method type needs to be delete right here. Click save, go to response and test, paste the ID that you get from here. And let's say you want to delete Michael, click on copy here, paste it in here. And now you can do a test API call. And we're getting a 204 success, and we're not getting any data back, which is fairly normal for deletion operations. And if we come back here, do refresh, we no longer see Michael here. So we've just demonstrated that delete works perfectly. Now, what you want to do is you want to come back here and you want to tie this delete button to that API call with the ID. And so I'm going to click on this button, click here, open this, add an action, type API call, delete, add some variables, ID, the only variable we have, click here, customer item, JSON path, and you want to type ID, confirm. and now it's going to pass in the ID of the current record that you're dealing with. Now, the way that API works is that it automatically gives you this condition. So if it's true, we need to do something. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to search for some kind of a snack bar. Show snack bar, delete it, and I'm going to copy this. Here, paste action, I'm going to say failed. Failed to delete. Okay, for one reason or another, it did not succeed. Now, you also want to make sure that you reload the page. And so if it succeeded, you can just click here, add an action, navigate to home page, okay? And you want to do an instant. Click here, do an instant reload. Okay, so now we are seeing two records. So let's say you want to delete John, press delete. You have a message right here. And now it reloaded the page and we are only seeing Jake. If you go back here, refresh this, we only have Jake in the system. And so we can go back to our app and we can delete the last record here, delete it, reloads, and there's no more customers to show us. And obviously you can do more things. You can create, update, a lot of interesting things. And it's all here. It's under API preview on a specific collection that you want to work with. So for customers, just click on API preview. For customers paid, API preview. You can obviously only do list and view because views are read-only collections, which makes sense. You only want to view the data and you want to modify the original collection instead. Now, like I mentioned before, there are two ways of working with data. The first way is with APIs, like we talked about now, but there is also another way, and that is programmatically. And so if you go back to your collection, click on API preview, and let's say you're working with JavaScript, here's a JavaScript snippet. Or if you're working with Dart, here's a Dart snippet. Now, because we're using a no-code tool such as FlutterFlow, this is not a method that we're going to be using directly. But what you can do is you can easily build custom widgets that either display data or modify data if that is important in your specific use case. And so if I go back to this app here and I go into custom code, I actually created a custom widget here that displays a specific field of the first record. And so because we don't have any records anymore, let me quickly create a brand new record so that we can display it inside of our custom widget. So I'm just going to call it James. Amount is 1000. Click create, and now we have one record here. And so if I go back into FlutterFlow, I actually wrote a very, very simple custom widget that uses this API, the Dart API, in order to list just one record that we're going to be fetching via its user ID. So if we come back here, there's a couple of things that you need to specify. So you want to make sure that you've specified this URL correctly here, and you want to make sure that you specify the ID. I'm using this get one call, and so it's just going to get one record. I'm going to go back here, click on this, copy the ID, paste it in here, and I need to specify the field name. So if we come in here, we have name and amount, and let's say I just want to display name. And so I specified the URL, I specified the collection customers, I specified the ID right here. Then I specified the name of that one record that we are fetching. And right here, I'm actually displaying the data that we are fetching from the database. And remember, you're going to have access to this entire app along with this custom widget if you are a member of our amazing Patriot community. Now, after you've modified the custom widget, you want to make sure you click on compile code, and that pre-compiles the custom widget so that you do not have any problems with your entire app down the road. So you need to wait a few moments here for this to finish. All right, and as you can see, there are no errors here, so everything is fine. In that case, you can come back to the UI builder, click here, and you can add this custom widget anywhere that you want. And in our case, we're just going to add it right here, which is part of this column. Click here, click on this custom widget, give it a width, 300, 300. And as you can see, it's already displaying the name here. It's already displaying the field. So if we come back here and we modify it, let's say change it to Robert, click save, come back here. And if we exit out and come back again, it's displaying Robert because it reloads the data. And obviously, if we run the app, it's going to display the right information. We come back here, do an instant reload, and we should see the custom widget displaying the correct information. And so as you can see, we're displaying the same data using two different access techniques. This right here is accessing it using the REST API, and this right here is accessing it using the Dart API. And so, of course, most of the time you're going to be accessing and working with the data, manipulating this data, creating, updating, deleting, etc., using the REST API, which is very, very easy to work with in Pocketbase. But in some other situations, if you want to access this data and modify this data and work with this data using the Dart API right here, you also have that option when it comes to building custom widgets and implementing custom UI elements for your users to interact with. Now, as I talked about earlier in the video, if you want to get started with Pocketbase and FlutterFlow or some of the other no-code builders you might be using, the fastest way to get started is by viewing and/or cloning this app. And you can do just that by joining our amazing Patreon community. And when you join our amazing Patreon community, you're going to get access to all the apps, not just this one, that I covered on this channel. Plus, you're going to get access to extra content. You're also going to get access to some of the emerging tools that I'm building. I recently built and published a very, very useful tool that a lot of people are gonna get a ton of value if they're working with FlutterFlow. That is exclusively available to our Patreon members. And best of all, we have an amazing Patreon community with some incredible people out there. So if you're looking to improve your no code, whether in order to build new apps, start a new company, or as a hobby, you will definitely get a ton of value by joining our rapidly growing Patreon community. And best of all, by joining our incredible Patreon community, you're going to be supporting this channel and supporting my work, and that is highly, highly appreciated. And so if all of that sounds like something you might be interested in, check out the link in the description and consider becoming a member. Now, if you guys are interested in some of my other videos having to do with no-code database backends, you'll be able to discover them right here.